Hi. How you going?
Good. How are you?
Still awkward about what I'm doing here. So, uh, generally, just want to say welcome to One Idea. Here we are again in our second attempt at a podcast. Last week, we talked a bit about why we're doing this and didn't really go too much into who we are because that's what we kind of want to do in the next couple. So, I'm Gemma. You're
I'm
Laura.
Laura. Yep. Yeah, I'm here.
And what we are wanting to do today is that I have the pleasure of talking with you, Laura, and getting to share a bit about you, or you can share a little bit about yourself, and we can get to know you. And is there anything you want to add at the moment there, Laura?
Well, no, I just think prefacing it that I don't feel as nervous today because I actually haven't listened to the recording of the
Nor
first
have I.
episode. Because I know the second I start hearing myself back,
Just going to be shivers
it's
up
going
and
to,
down the
yeah,
spine.
back to
Yeah.
the stuff we were talking about, it will be hard. And also, I think prefacing that where you've organized these questions without me sort of knowing because we kind of want to keep that unfiltered nature. And so I have no idea where this is going to go. I mean, ultimately, the nature is to get to know me, and that every person has multiple facets, and the same will be for Gemma next week's. I mean, that's kind of the way we're vibing at the moment, and then we'll go from there, I guess.
Okay. Great. So I did write just a short little snippet. If I do this, can you still see my face? Everything's normal,
Yep.
isn't it?
You
Yeah.
actually look more lit up. You look more luminous.
I'm not in a reddy pinky tinge. Good. Okay, so this woman, Laura, she's a world salsa champion, created countless Latin dancing shows and taught dance to gazillions of students, all while gaining an HR qualification. I think it's a degree, right? You got a degree?
I've got a diploma and a
Diploma.
post-grad as
Okay.
of last week or the week before because
Thank
I've
you for
also been
clarifying.
studying it.
Yeah. And working in not-for-profits and also like a bazillion-dollar finance company while raising two beautiful sons who I adore very much with her husband, chasing her dreams, the truth and the reason for it all. She's been a dear friend of mine for over 20 years now, seeing me through some of the toughest and the most joyful times in my life. She has a jelly, soft, big heart behind an ironclad wall. She is Laura Elizabeth Anderson.
Wow, that was so beautiful.
So I just really wanted to get you to share a little bit of your background. So your upbringing, education, your career, sort of what in summarizing up until now, as much as you can.
So I was born in Australia, in Melbourne, to would say like at the time, lower middle class family in suburbs of Melbourne, Oakley in particular, because I think that was actually quite relevant to why I went the way I went. So my mum is Australian, but like English background, dad's New Zealand. So at the time that was a little bit more, like spicy, I guess, because dad was from New Zealand, so he brought a different sort of take on life. My mum was the dominant parent and, what we probably would call now like a helicopter parent. At a time where that wasn't really the norm, but in a way she was ahead of her time, I guess, and very, I guess, looking back, she just was very, very consumed by her kids. And that also sort of comes with the fact that I have two brothers that died. And I was the child. So one died at birth, was born for 12 hours, and the other was alive for 4 months. And that was, my dad and mum, my mum was 24, my dad was 28, I guess. 24, or maybe even younger, 23, 20, something like that. So that made them, I guess, as a couple, and that kept them together. And then I was not the rainbow baby, but I was the blessing after that. So I think by nature, she was overprotective because she's already lost two kids. And so, but really early on, like 3 years old, I can remember. Well, I can't remember clearly, but it would have been at that age that I saw ballet on the television.
Mm.
And I just said to my mum that I wanted to do that. My parents aren't creatives at all. So while
Mm.
they sort of love everything, they weren't creatives in all means, not really. There's a couple of people in my extended family that were. And from about 3, I started the journey of ballet. However, I actually hated the structure of it and loved just the free element, where you'd get at
Mm.
the end of class and get a skirt or a scarf and dance around like a fairy or a princess or something like that, and that was a thing that hooked me more than the actual structure of dance. However, the structure of ballet is the thing that really set up my dance career
Mm.
ultimately. And so I always wanted to leave dancing, always halfway through the year, because the free fun play stopped and then all the
Yeah.
structure came, and my mum always made me finish out the year.
Mm.
So again, only in hindsight do I realize, because she did that, I stuck at it another year and another
Mm.
year and another year, and slowly, I guess, had a skill behind me with ballet in particular.
Can
Everything
I just
else,
ask with
yeah,
that, do you remember at the time, obviously hating that you still had to keep going?
hating it.
Yeah.
Hating it, and also, this was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was a really strict ballet teacher, like
Mm.
someone that we wouldn't even accept as a teacher today. And the nature of ballet is it's very disciplined, and it's very much like, I always say it's a bit like the army for girls.
Yeah.
So
So what do you
that
feel like that did for you, staying in such a strict sort of, I imagine there'd be both positive and negative sort of consequences
mm,
of committing to something that is disciplined, like,
hmm
what that does for you, and also possibly the other shadow of what that brings you when you are kind of in this really, as a very young person, in
mm.
such strict confinement around
So it was a
rules.
blessing for me,
Yeah.
because I think, which I will talk, like, I would say I'm an undiagnosed ADHD person.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I have quite a few data points to sort of suggest that's the case. And if I didn't have that discipline, I don't know what would have happened in those years. So I
Mm.
think the discipline of the ballet and the regiment, and while it felt very harsh, it did keep me in a structure that
Mm.
supported me
Mm.
ultimately, which also, my parents were quite, I guess, strict in all parts of my life. So there was a lot of structure in our life.
Yeah.
And I think that structure was the thing that got me through, really. And
Mm.
I would say the same for my brother, because he's also neurodiverse. So I think the structure, because then I think later on, when we didn't have the structure, that's when things sort of start to fall apart a little bit,
Yeah.
because you've got that forced structure from your family. And then, I think it took me a while to become an adult, because I had to learn how to have that structure without it being controlled for me
Yeah.
ultimately. So it helped, I think, ground me in many ways. And I guess, it probably worked a muscle in me that I still do to this day, probably to my detriment, is I will stay in a situation that's hard, because I know that it ebbs and it flows.
Yeah.
So, what might feel really hard at this moment is for a reason of some sort. And then there's always like a sort of a hill or a pinnacle, and then it comes back down again.
Yeah.
And the reward is that you get through that hump.
What about the relationship with when you are in strict conditions as a child in a dance
Mhm.
situation, for example, or any sport or whatever it is? What about um, the sense of pressure, the sense of like perfectionism, or the
Mm.
sense of kind of like, does it have any residue on that, on feelings of needing to be never enough? Or do you feel like it actually gives you self-esteem because you do end up achieving those things? You do end up kind of seeing, oh, I can do it because I got through the hard thing.
No. So I think things have changed a lot, but in that environment, it takes your self-esteem away. But again, I think, like, I know things have changed. Like, I'm a teacher. I
Yeah.
see how it is at schools now, just that way of teaching.
Mm.
And that was very much through ridicule or putting you down, or, saying you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you learn at a very young age that, especially in ballet and a lot of dance forms, that you weren't good enough. So
Yeah. Did it motivate you?
Uh no, because so I think like what I'm thinking about is so from about 3 to 11 I had a very, very strict teacher, to the point that I would have stopped dancing if my mum hadn't made the decision to change schools for me at about 11. And then I actually experienced, because she had trained me so well, but with so much fear and harsh conditions, that when I moved to a much sort of fun loving school, I was the best in that school. And so
Yeah.
that pain ended up being like, this is so great. And I thrived more in that school because I enjoyed it. And I was really good because I'd done all of those, 7
Because
years
you
of
had
really
the
hard work.
comparison.
I had the
Because you,
comparison, but she did actually give me the skill set too, the hard ass teacher.
yeah.
But as I'm sort of saying that, the perfectionism was through the whole thing. But, around sort of 12, 13, then eating disorders came. And so what
And do
I'm
you
now,
feel like that was all part of that base?
it wasn't just dancing. So as I said, that strict regiment came in the family too,
Yeah.
and so there was control sort of everywhere, I guess, in my life. And also, my mum came from strict weight conditions, my grandma came from strict weight conditions, so that was a generational thing on top of being a dancer. So, then it became even hyper obvious in their eyes, I guess, that, weight and physicality is so important. So I would say the food thing, because the food and the weight thing is a big part of my story, but I'm only sort of realizing this now, that would have been a byproduct of those really strict years.
Yeah.
Because I remember quite viscerally when the food issues sort of kicked in, and it would have been around 12 or 13. And then it would have been binge eating, bulimia, but not extreme, but still there, up until sort of that would have gone to my late teens, and then just disordered eating from then on.
And by disordered eating, you mean what? Can you break that down?
Disordered eating, I guess, is having just a really bad relationship with food. So I guess it wouldn't just be like your bulimia or your anorexia. It would be controlling food, though. It would be controlling intakes of food, whether it's through regimented dieting, whether it's through over exercising, whether it's like I'm doing it in some way as we speak right now. I mean, I'm doing it with much more awareness, because there is that feeling of control when you have that, and I guess because we don't really control other aspects of our life, and we actually don't control the food either, but I think I do.
Right.
And so it's like an anchor to come back to. Yeah. So that was sort of teens. And then from high school was pretty shit for me. A lot of bullying and a lot of bouncing around. So I went to one school in year 7, which was huge. And I came from this tiny little primary school and just disappeared in that school. Found it very hard to make friends. And also all my friends from primary school had gone to a separate school. So I had been pulled away from my comfort zone. From there, I ended up changing to that school where all those friends were, but actually ended up facing the worst bullying that there possibly was. I was also a bully too, because it was really bad for a few years, I would say. Like 14, 15, most girls were either involved or the school was involved. And then I actually had a relationship, like my first, boyfriend in school. But that actually is what shifted for me, because he didn't go to that school. And so it gave me an outlet that wasn't all the
There was
bitchiness
more
at
to your
school.
world than just this. Weren't
Yeah.
defined by that day to day.
I'd also stopped dancing at that time too, because I'd had an ankle reconstruction. So I didn't have dancing either to go out like that as that outside escape. Really didn't have anything. And so, it was the boyfriend. When the boyfriend kind of came in, that was the space. And then over those sort of couple of years, I think everyone grew up a little bit and it became less toxic. And then I moved to Box Hill Senior, where I met Laura Gay, And I know
Yeah,
we're not meant to. We also said we didn't really want to talk about other people, but Laura Gay is a significant person to both of us because it's how I met you.
that's right. Yeah. She's kind of the anchor for our whole group of friends that
That's right.
we all met Laura and then
She's
therefore met
our
each
sort
other.
of center point.
Yeah.
And if, we hadn't have met her, we wouldn't know each other. We wouldn't be the group we are today. And so that was at 15, I think I met her. But I moved to Box Hill Senior specifically to study dance, theatre studies,
Yeah.
drama. And that, again, was another anchor for me. So I think, like thinking back to my teenage years, dancing and the arts were always the things that grounded me and anchored me back to reality.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is that when they weren't there, there was a lot of relationship breakdowns, a lot of fighting,
Yeah.
a lot of unease. And so, yeah, the last years of high school were the best for me because I actually found like-minded people. I found
Yeah.
my tribe as well.
Mm.
It was just such a different experience. It also connects with religion too.
Dance.
No, as in that moment in time, because that's when all
That
the
time of your life. Yeah.
Christianity, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
because also there was a seeking, there was a searching, there was a looking, there was a wanting to belong,
So,
and
talking about that, where do you think, because I know you and probably, I think we probably got closest when I became pregnant, right? That would be
Mm.
our really catapulting into our
That would
closer
be,
relationship.
yes, I would say yes.
We'd always been friends before that
Yes.
as part of the group and friends with each
I think
other.
it's when it broke to the real friendship, to a
Yeah,
real,
to
like,
the
warts and all
core kind of
friendship.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess I've always sort of known you as someone who's really always sort of seeking that truth and
Mm.
seeking for further understanding for yourself, for growth. When do you feel like you realize, were you always like that, or did that kind of begin at some point? Do you remember when that came about for you?
So I guess the only time I can remember having that like curiosity was I remember when it could have been there earlier, but I remember in maybe year 9, so I would have been like 14 or 15, and we had a class around the Palestinian and Israeli conflict.
It's
I know
relevant.
it's very random, but it's very random that so the teacher though I got along with the teacher. The teacher was more of like a younger teacher,
Yeah.
and so he was more open to questions and questioning things.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's actually another moment I just realized when I was really maybe 9, but I'll get to that. He then took us to a synagogue and he took us to a mosque. And so it was my
Wow, what a cool
first,
teacher.
yeah, he was great. And it was my first understanding and seeing other religions. Not that I grew up religious either, but I
Yeah.
knew that there was Christianity. Like I knew that there was, why we kind of celebrated Christmas. We never went to church, but I knew that that was a religion of some sort. I
Yep.
didn't have any knowledge of any other religions. And I remember questioning the rabbi and asking how to become follow Judaism or start that path. And I just remember getting like a laugh back, like, oh, like this isn't something that you're going to try. Like he didn't say that, but it was just like, my ignorance in that question. But it did start me going, well,
But
how
you're
do
like a
you become?
kid
I
too.
know,
Like, great question.
but I think, yeah,
He just found it a little bit funny.
yeah, there
Yeah.
was something amusing there for him. But I think it was like, well, how do you, is there a possibility to go down the path of Judaism? Is there a possibility to go down the path of Islam? And that was what started the journey from a religious point of view.
Yeah.
I do have another moment of curiosity when I was like 9 or 10. And I was certain that, and I don't know why, and I don't know what I saw, but I was certain that aliens created the pyramids.
Oh, when you were 9.
Yeah. And
So
so my
this is
mum,
pre-internet. Like, I mean, the internet was probably out, but no one's not
there
using
wouldn't have
it.
been any. There wouldn't have been any internet yet because it would have been early 90s. Well, there might have been internet, but we
Not
definitely
in
didn't
the
have it.
house. Yeah.
And I don't even. We just wouldn't have. It would have been maybe some kind of movie or something I must have
Yeah.
watched.
Okay. Yeah.
But because of that interest, my mum was like, well, let's go learn about pyramids. And she took me to some expo, and I started questioning the guy. And I'm like, but surely aliens made this. Like, how could humans make it? Was just, I do remember this awkward conversation. So yeah, they're
It's
my
so cool
moments.
that you felt confident to ask these
Yeah.
authorities around. Like,
Yeah. So, and I definitely had a confidence for sure.
mm,
Definitely had a confidence as a kid and as a teenager, and and I can fake that confidence now. But yeah, they're the moments I can really think of as being a seeker. And I guess, my mum in particular always made us question, wouldn't say make us question like the bigger things, but just in general, there was always a back and forth around dinner of questioning things and trying to talk through things. And she would have
yeah.
similarities of that too. Like still to this day, she's a questioner. She's got that curiosity too.
Yeah.
So, potentially it was learnt there. Um, and then I would say, for a long while, that seeking was mainly for spirituality and
Mm,
mainly for belonging.
mm.
As I get older, that curiosity goes into dancing. It goes into my HR. It goes into anything that I do. But
Mm.
I first didn't have it in those other areas earlier on.
And why do you think it's permeated to those areas now as well?
Maybe because I was learning then, and I felt like I just sort of did more what I was told.
Right. Okay.
So I didn't have
Oh, in
my
a dance or in an HR, in a workplace. So you sort of have gone through those processes and now you're at a stage where you can then start to bring in more of your own curiosity rather than just sitting there passively kind of
totally,
going,
yeah.
what am I
So
supposed to
like,
do? Yeah.
for the first 10 years, I was just with dancing, just doing what I was told or
Yeah.
teaching what I'd already been taught.
Yeah.
And not really questioning anything. Also, I think as I got older, a lot of the things I didn't question ended
Mm.
up not being correct as well.
Things you didn't question.
So, for example, with dancing,
Yeah.
how do I say this? So, the main style that I taught in was
Mm.
ballroom dancing.
Yep.
And ballroom dancing is a English created concept. So it's
Right.
come from England.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're using music from Latin America.
Right.
So they have created their own stories to it. But I never knew that.
As in British have
Yeah,
created
they're
their own
their
stories.
own,
Yeah.
for example, I'll use one style. So there's a dance called the Paso Doble. And there isn't really a dance, like as I've gotten older, that is the Paso Doble. Like there is not a dance in Spain that's dance called that doesn't exist.
Right. It's like butter chicken in
Exactly.
Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
Indians
It's like
created.
there's like flamenco, and there is the bullfight and things, but the way that they've interpreted it isn't correct
Right.
necessarily.
Okay.
And so it's a version of it. It's a fictional story
Yeah.
that has
Okay.
some roots of it.
I'm just
And
thinking
this is
of
very
Strictly
controversial.
Ballroom.
And like, I sort of have to, I'm not trying to put ballroom dancing down, but I guess, the more I've learned about the Latin culture and gone deeper in the Latin culture, I had to sort of see where I didn't have the full picture or the full story because I didn't
Yeah.
question it, because I just got taught it. And so, yeah, that probably came like 10 years after really teaching and being in that world, when I met my husband, who is Colombian, and when I went more into the Latin culture that's away from dancing, did I see, oh, these things don't actually match up.
Right. And so you feel like I'm taking from that you feel possibly like there's an injustice to the Latin dancing, the origins of that, because again, white people, British people have just kind of gone, oh, we'll take this and we'll create something without crediting properly what the story is or where the
Well,
dance
without
comes
the
from.
real history and truth of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not all of their dances, and I don't want to say, but there are some particularly that are
Mm,
rhythms that they've created their own story, their own way of dancing to it as well.
yeah.
And so the only reason why maybe I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder is because I told that story for so many years too.
Yeah, right.
And then it's like, hang on a minute. That's not completely true. And I guess as a truth seeker, like for some people, that probably doesn't even really bother them.
So there's a specific story though with the Paso Doble, is there? There's a specific
It doesn't
when you tell that
exist.
story.
So like the way that it dance, so in ballroom dancing, there is a dance called the Paso Doble that the
Yeah.
man, like Strictly Ballroom,
Yeah,
was
that's what I
created
keep
on it.
thinking
Yeah,
about. But as
exactly.
in when you say story,
Yeah.
when you say
Okay, well,
what would
Strictly
you
Ballroom,
mean?
like, and again, like, don't know how much we should really be, but okay, Strictly Ballroom
Yeah.
is fictitious,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's actually fictitious too. So, like, when when she goes back to the scene with her Spanish dad, and he's like, "Do dance a paso doble, do dance,"
Yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah,
moment in
yeah,
time.
yeah. That's not even a thing because he
Well,
wouldn't have
it'd be
done that.
flamenco. That's what it
Right.
would be.
Right.
It would be
Okay.
flamenco. So what he's dancing is flamenco, but they call it paso doble, which is not true.
Because it's a ballroom thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, because they're connecting it to their ballroom story.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah. So
so,
it's just like inaccurate history and they're kind of
yeah,
just putting this
yeah, but
and
you're
they're
putting
making
these
like
three.
Spanish people say it.
Yeah,
That actor.
exactly.
I don't even know if that actor was Spanish. I'm
And
not
look,
sure. Sorry.
again, like I've choreographed for Strictly Ballroom the musical, so like I've also I don't want to slander the thing that I love, but
Yeah.
I think that yeah, I didn't question any of those things and I
Mm.
just learnt it. And, it's a little bit different with ballet because ballet's roots go to a federation that I guess is more esteemed across the world.
Yeah.
And the same with ballroom dancing, it is esteemed across the world, but mainly for the white person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the white version. We'll take those flavors
Yeah.
and make it what we want it to
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
we find it exotic and exciting.
Yeah, well, I think potentially, like to be fair, like that's all they might have known 80
Yeah.
years ago too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they didn't have the internet, they didn't have books and books and books, but then where has been the correction over time,
Or where have they actually then learnt those things, the Paso Doble? Where have they learnt that even? Has it just been taken too, if you look back?
Yeah.
I don't know. You would have to go there.
Yeah, and I mean, potentially, I need to look deeper into why they went that way. And so, maybe that's my ignorance right now is that I'm seeing it for what they're calling it.
Mm.
But again, like that's one example. There's multiple examples.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads to why I did a show a
Mm.
couple of years ago called Salsa the Show, because salsa also is misrepresented of what it actually is
Mm.
and where it comes from. And
Can you sort of put in a statement how you would describe salsa or what salsa is?
yeah, so salsa means sauce,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
salsa, so you think of like salsa with your nachos, it means sauce.
Yeah.
And so the whole purpose of the word sauce is it's a blend of everything, right?
Mhm.
And so what salsa is a blend of rhythms.
Mm.
And so when a lot of the immigrants moved to New York, is that it was different rhythms that create salsa. So
Right.
it's a fusion, it's a melting pot of different things.
Right.
And salsa, up until I was sort of in my late 20s, I thought salsa came from Cuba or I thought salsa came from Colombia. And there's all these different origin stories, but actually salsa came from New York because it was a fusion of
Yeah.
rhythms.
Yeah.
So again, though, that only comes with curiosity,
Yeah.
I guess, to find that. And not everyone cares.
Yeah.
People are just happy with the baseline story.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are happy just to be like, oh, yeah, Cuba sounds good. Colombia sounds good. South America sounds good. Could
Yeah.
be anywhere. That's fine. And so, yeah, that my curiosity has been the reason for why I've done things more later on in life. And as I said, it bleeds over into dancing and now it bleeds over into HR
Yeah.
as well.
So if you were to look at dance for yourself now, and you sort of touched on it a little bit more, a little bit before, what in a statement, what for you is dance now?
So, dance is the thing that keeps me grounded. So, back to
Mm.
what I was saying, from those teenage years, I thought dance was many things in those sort of, especially in my 20s. And I was doing it for different reasons, but I've been away from dancing as a professional for a while now, and what I've realized, it was the thing that was regulating anxiety for me. It was the thing that was regulating my breathing. It was the thing that was stopping my mind from racing because I was doing so many different things at once. It was keeping me present.
Yeah.
So there was all of these more spiritual, I guess, things that it was doing, but I just saw it for this other thing, and it was much more of a tool to either create income, or a tool to create success, or a tool to create fame, or achievement, and I really saw it for its superficial nature in my 20s especially. But now, as I start stepping back from it in that way, I was like, wow, no, it was doing all these other things,
Yeah. The whole
because now I
time.
don't have them. And it's like, what was regulating me over all these years? So it's the thing that grounds me, and it's the thing that connects me to me.
Yeah.
So profound.
Okay. Well, what did I've got a few other things, but for me and for our relationship, we've talked about this so many times, I guess, that we have really different energies. And when it comes to just literally waking up in the day, I feel like we would wake up differently. I want you to go in a little bit. For me, I've always admired your I don't know how you would put it, but your motivation, your wanting to, obviously we've talked a bit about seeing things through, sticking to the end, having a vision, and then actually implementing it and seeing it through, which is probably credit to your mum and dad for keeping you in those terrible ballet classes for so long, and you figuring out that you can do it if you keep going, and you'll get through it. But that you seem to have and again, it might be the ADHD, but you've got this kind of really inspiring motivation. It's really taken you all over the globe doing different things. So can you touch on that a little bit? Like, what would be your number one? What do you think the root of that is? What burns?
So I can't remember if we spoke about this last week, or if we spoke about it as just in a conversation, but I'm learning right now that it might have been something that wasn't in my best interest that's been motivating me. But I would say at certain times, so not always. But as a kid, as like when I was young, I just always was a dreamer. Always had big, big ideas. Like my mum will say, like when they were doing a house renovation, I came to her with a floor plan of my bedroom, of how I was going to have like this little lounge area over here, and then you were going to move into like the bedroom area with like this, 4-poster bed, like everything. I just had very big ambitions for. I always had lists growing up of achievements, like, and it could have been, I remember, like, I really wanted a double bed, like as a teenager, so I'd have a list, so very quite pushy with my lists with my parents. I also remember, in primary school, starting a dance class, like, and getting like 30 kids in a room and stuff. I don't know why I did that. Like, I actually don't know why, but I just did it.
Yeah.
And so there's always been this thing for me that I know, if I have an idea that feels good and if I jump on it, I'm more likely to do the thing than if I keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen that through my life. But you talk about, that motivation, like the motivation thing for me has been a detriment a lot of the time as well, because to get things done, or to complete a task, you have to stop listening to yourself. So, you physically might be tired, or
Right.
you
Despite
despite,
circumstances.
yes.
Yeah.
So I'm a despite what I'm actually feeling, as in my 20s with all the dancing that I did, like I missed so many birthdays of friends or family, or it was I didn't have flexibility with socializing because I had such limited time. Still to this day, it's very similar for me. So it's been at a cost of certain things. But it's very hard for me once I've started something to not see it through in some way.
Do you think you were born with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think I was born with it, and I think one of my children has it too. But then I think it can be like flourished and grown. So I think I was allowed to run wild with my imagination and do the things that I wanted, as long as it wasn't going to harm anyone.
Yeah.
Through my parents. So I think
Yeah.
they let me do that, and then that kind of went into teenage, into early 20s. It was actually in my 20s, through some toxic relationships, that I kind of, like, my bubble burst in a way, because I realized I was doing things without much skill behind them. So,
How?
and potentially, those people were also just jealous as well. So it's hard to know what was happening at the time. But I definitely know that, I will give anything a go, even if I didn't have the skill or the.
Yeah, you seem to have a level of self-promotion that absolutely terrifies me and makes me feel sick. Like,
So I think that was even more,
so far.
and I think that was even more when I was younger.
Yeah, it is. And I think
Yeah.
that like you sort of just like, I'm going there even if I don't know why. Like, you're one of those people, yeah, I speak German. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
And
It's
I'll
like
figure it out
you'll
as I
fake
get
it
there.
till you
Yeah.
make it. And I
Yeah.
was just like, I would know German fluently but not know a certain dialect. I'd be like, I don't really know. Do you know what I mean?
You would
Like,
know it fluently. You would be, and that's the thing. There are those people
Yeah.
that will say, like, in the language, like, I don't speak this language, and they speak it to you.
Yeah.
Whereas I will be the person that speaks in English and figures it out.
Yeah, you just
Like, for
on the
example,
fly. Yeah.
so someone's come to me that wants to do a show, and they want me to direct it and produce it. And in my mind, it's actually a really simple show. And I'm like, yep, I think I can do this. I went to a venue the other day, and I was telling them that this is what's going to happen, and I wanted to set a date for May next year, which for me is like, whew, so much time. And they were like, so are you sure you don't want to make it for like July? Or, I'm like, no. Because I also know that if I take it too far out, I will lose interest, and that's that ADHD. So I have to know, like, if I have to give myself enough time that I don't actually have a cardiac arrest.
Yeah, no time. But you also need to always be moving on it.
Yes. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
they're like, oh, but you haven't actually written the script yet. I'm like, that's fine. Like, that part will come once I lock the date in. So I like work the opposite way around.
Me. Yeah, I just think it's amazing. It's such an amazing trait to have watched you. And you always used to look at you always used to look at us girls. So there's a group of us, right? And you used to look at us with absolute filth in your eyes of just like, what the fuck are you all doing sitting here whinging and moaning about why you can't just fucking do it? You would look at us with disdain.
So back to that. Hang on, I need to, because there is truth there. But I think what I would get really upset about is that you included in that group are all so talented. It's not like you're all sitting there as like little blobs that just, you actually have the same talent. No one in our friendship group doesn't have the same talent in some way as I do. But the limits that block you all, and this has been my journey, because that's what I perceived back then. The limits that were blocking were like, but that's not a block. It's not a block. Yeah. I promise you, it's not a block.
Yeah.
But that's were my lessons over my 20s, because I used to get so frustrated that like it was like wasted potential for me, like seeing you guys just sit there. Yeah. But what I struggle with is, emotionally processing things and feeling things, and that's where you and our friendship group flourish, and what I was going to say, which I don't think I said, is that sometimes the fuel for me to get things done was just because I had to get it done, or because I didn't want to look like a failure. I didn't want to look like I wasn't enough. Like I was saying, those things that, all those sort of woundings from my childhood of the perfectionism and not being good enough were some of my driving reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
Not because
Yeah.
I just had this amazing energetic flow that led me to
Yeah.
that thing.
Yeah.
It was
the failure,
trying to
fear of failure.
validate
Yeah.
my
Fears.
insecurities
Yeah. Yeah.
into the point that, I would say that's been the case up until today. And so it's like, hang on, there's another way that you can do things. Like, you can do things just because it feels right and it flows, and you don't have to put this force behind it to happen. So I'm going to try and learn that way.
Yeah.
And that's foreign to me. And I think it's, it could also be said that at the time I was the one that was struggling the most. That's why I had to do all those things.
Well, how do you measure? How do you measure that, But I definitely always could see your inner turmoil. Like that was always something that your frustration and your what's the word? Unrest. Your inner unrest that you would have, I always saw, and it would and there was always this real push pull I could see for you that would often make you harden so much, like as well. Like you were the ironclad wall that I said in the intro. It's you've brought that down so much over the years. I mean, that has changed a lot, and cracks and ooze has come out of that. But there was always this extreme self-protection clad that I could see with you within our friendship as well, particularly, and how sensitive actually you are to and have been to acceptance and love, or your view of, am I accepted and loved here, or something. Like, can you talk a bit about that, about what you think that or perceive that to be over the years?
So, well, that is the woundings, I think, my core woundings. And I would say that it's because I talk about the ballet stuff, but talk about, the general. I think I grew up with a mum and family that needed me to achieve as well. And, well, that's how it was perceived. I don't believe that to this day, but I definitely felt like,
You felt the pressure of that.
yeah, and I think there was a few, like, rejection came in a lot of friendships as well, out of nowhere for me when I was younger as well. So I think that over time hardened me for sure,
Yeah.
because me being myself came with really full-on reactions. And ultimately, it was just because I hadn't met people until I met you guys, really, that I felt like I belonged with. And then through that, there's also the addiction stuff. Like, so there was always a feeling of uncomfortability as well in my own skin. And so it felt like something was wrong fundamentally with me. Like there was like something was fundamentally wrong. And
What did
again,
that feel like? Can you explain a bit more about what that looked
like
like or felt
it
like for you?
felt like, so, through, and I can say this because I've done some work on it, that it still feels like it's there, but it just feels like you're a piece of shit, really, on the inside. Like your core is a piece of shit. And if I think into my core, that's where I go to. So that's whatever you want to be, the negative self-talk. I don't know what it is, but that's the fundamental feeling. Couldn't explain what that was. I've done some sort of therapy on it, and there's not reasons as such, but there could be reasons of why that's there, but it's not because anything happened to me necessarily. It's just because I felt like my parents couldn't see me for me. And then I felt like when I was put into the world, my friends couldn't see me for me. And then so it felt like what I was presenting or who I was didn't match what it felt like on the inside.
Yeah.
And then over time, the food stuff became a way to work with that uncomfortable feeling. And then as I got into my teens, alcohol became that thing to take that feeling of uncomfortability away. And then the seeking, the soul searching was because surely someone's got the answer for me of why I feel like this, you know, or surely I can be healed of this. You know, whatever it is, it was this feeling of like, I feel like this on the inside. So surely there's something that can
A
help me.
fix.
Yeah, a fix, you know?
Yeah.
And so, as I said, I knew fundamentally that food and doing what I was doing with food and doing what ended up happening with alcohol wasn't it. I knew that was making it worse, but I couldn't find that answer. And then as I did start to soften, I would say, and I still harden, but as I do start to soften is when I started to have a bit more self-compassion for myself. Stopped playing the victim so much in my life. And I know that sounds crazy because that's the opposite of self-compassion, but I think, you know, back to the friend stuff, you know, it was like I felt viscerally affected that you guys weren't living your fullest potential.
Yeah.
Like, that's really not my problem. And
Yeah,
I
but I
can
guess
still
it's that
love
thing
you.
of looking at if I did what they did,
Yeah. How would I
I
survive? How would I survive with
I can't
myself?
let myself not achieve and be those things, so they can't. Like
Yeah.
I kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. I do also think, like, as I am getting to know myself, is in general, I can see everyone's fullest potential,
Yeah.
but I don't need to get frustrated with that. It's just what I
Yeah.
can see now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I still do, and I still will always do that with whoever I meet, but
Do you
it's
share
not,
that with people?
it depends. Depends on the environment that I'm in.
Mm.
So usually if I'm in like I will share it through work, whether it's HR, whether it's coaching or something like that, I will
Yeah.
usually share parts of it. But yeah, it depends. It depends on the relationship I'm in with them and how close we are. So yeah, I think that's a gift that I've now realized that I have. And therefore it makes me feel like also back to the small talk thing that I know someone really well because I feel like I just want to get to the meaty questions of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered that question, but yeah, I guess in general, it's like, and even now, so, you know, I'll touch on the addiction stuff a little bit because I feel like that's my next sort of thing that's softening me or opening me up a little bit is because I was, you know, using substances, food, alcohol, cigarettes to numb that feeling of feeling shit. It
Yeah.
only really exacerbated that feeling over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And then consciously, when I was about 28, I knew that my drinking was out of control, but I didn't identify as an alcoholic or.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Just
That
something happened.
just
We had a little blip there.
Did that happen to you too?
Yeah, it happened to me
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
I think it's
All right.
like recording it as we're going, so we might just have to fix that. So, yeah, I knew that, and I'd been told over the years by certain people that like I had a problem with drinking, and I always had a viscerally physical reaction to drinking. But then I was in the relationship that I'm in now, my marriage now. So when I'd met him, I had a really horrible moment with him where I just called him the worst things in the world, but I don't remember it, had no memory of it. And I think it was the first time that something finally meant enough for me to go, I don't need to drink anymore. Like, I don't need to drink. So I remember that was about 10 years ago. Trying to stop drinking, which I did try and have pretty much since then drank very, very minimally. However, when I have had all my guards down and taken out all my control measures, you know, alcohol can still get the better of me. And what I've now realized is the controlled drinking is just as taxing as being a full alcoholic, because I'm having to mentally dance around what I'm going to
It's the
do.
dry drunk.
Yeah, the dry drunk, so to speak. Yeah. And so, 5 months ago, I've started the 12-step journey. And I think already, like, it hasn't been easy, but already there's so much relief been taken off me with now that I don't have to drink. And actually, I was saying this the other day to my mum, I think. I found the spiritual thing that I was always looking for.
Through AA.
Yeah, and through the 12 steps, because it's a spiritual experience. And so that searching has kind of lined up with the thing that's also helping me think clearer and have a burden lifted off me. So I feel like it's just another layer that's sort of unraveling to, yes, ultimately soften me and ultimately take away those, and that feeling, of feeling shit and feeling like a piece of shit is the story that I hear so often in those rooms, and it's nice to hear that other people have that feeling too.
Yeah.
Because you do feel very alone in it.
When you were talking before, I was, I didn't want to interrupt, but I definitely had the thought that I feel like that's kind of part of the human condition. There's something we have this sort of, I don't know. I definitely relate to that feeling also. Ultimately, at your core, just thinking I'm an absolute piece of shit. And then knowing as well that the reality of that is not the case, right? But it's the kind of this underneath sizzle that you drag around with you everywhere you go. Or I feel like I always take that with me everywhere I go. And I actually think that things like practices like the 12-step program or any kind of practice that brings you to nature, to your body, to a higher something, whatever you want to call it, to your higher in you, is the thing that the reason we need that is because we all kind of feel like a piece of shit. And that's the only thing that relieves us from that state of human condition, from that state of going, well, we come here to experience this piece of shit skin, and to survive that kind of process. I mean, that's what I'm coming to know more, is that that's not the abnormal. It's not the abnormal to be like, you're not strange and alone in your feelings of that. We just need to find the thing that connects us to being set free of that.
Absolutely.
Ultimate.
Absolutely.
Thought being. What do you think? Were you going to say something?
I also do think, though, like today as I sit here, that feeling of being a piece of shit is softened, like it's disappearing in the way. Like it's still there right down at its core, but it doesn't bring me to tears like it could, and it has.
But do you think that's not because of your 12-step, because of your
programming, that's what I'm
because
saying.
Of all those things? You leave those things alone and that will creep right back up where it was before.
Absolutely. You're right. Yes.
What do you want the world to know about you, if anything? If there was something.
What do I want the world to know? Is that there is nothing I don't want to hear, I guess, about someone's story. And, I think another skill that I've had is I've been able to sit in the worst stories of people's lives, and I feel quite comfortable there, and in people. So maybe because of that piece of shit feeling in myself is that, hearing someone's struggles, darkness, I can hold you there. And I'm there with you. So I think that's also being that seeking is like hearing the depths of everyone's stories. So yeah, I guess is that there is nothing that I don't want to hear. And, I grow so much more from hearing from other people.
Yeah.
So using the rooms of AA is that is the moment where I feel we're all connected as one. That's a moment when, I hear someone sitting across the road from me. They may have lived a completely different life, had a completely different drinking experience too, but yet I still see myself in them.
Yeah.
I still learn something
Absolutely.
from them.
Absolutely.
And I think that is, the purpose of this for us is that I need to feel on a regular basis that we are all one. I need to feel that to know what we're fighting for in this world, in this life as well. I also know my journey is to soften.
Yeah.
And so this is helping that for me too. So yeah, I think that's it at this moment. I don't know what more I can say there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then, I mean, this could be a bit of a cheeky question because it would ask something of you that maybe you don't want to share. But my other question, the other side of that was, what do you hide? What do you hide about yourself?
I hide my arrogance, but it's there. Like, it's so obviously there. Like, I absolutely hate it.
Such a great answer.
I hate that I have this arrogance. I hate it.
Yeah.
But it's just there, and I'm trying my best to hide it, and it always comes out all the time. And I guess,
it's because it's so beautifully vulnerable to share that too, because that's the last thing we want to be seen like, right?
Well, I'm trying to really look at that at the moment because, back to that, I was quite my ego was quite inflated as a kid.
Yeah.
Even with all of these sort of hits, as I was saying, I still had this very overinflated ego.
Yeah.
It's been hit, I think, for good reasons over my life. But there still is this arrogance in me that, I also have to accept it in a way. But it's a thing that I'm always trying to hide or to not have as a part of me.
Yeah. Isn't it that thing, though, of high ego, low self-esteem? So the shittier
Probably.
you feel about yourself, the more that you're going the other way. So you flip between those two seesawing feelings. Oh, I'm fucking amazing. Oh, no, what are you thinking, you piece of shit? You're disgusting. It's like the healthy balance is that, like, I've got these great traits and I've got these shitty traits, and I'm, it's that I'm no better, no worse than anyone, but it's because it's that ego thing. It's just wanting to soothe itself, and the soothing could be, shit, or the soothing could be, you're the best.
Yeah,
comes in both
definitely.
forms.
The best is helping the soothing of the shitness. Yeah, but then the arrogance and the ego has really stopped me from allowing things and allowing people in and thinking I can do it all myself and asking for support, and that's really stopped me over my life.
Yeah. I love that answer. I'm so glad I asked that one. I just wanted to touch a little bit about conspiracy theories. Because I feel like this has been a really key thing that sometimes, and conspiracy theories, look, I want to be really clear here. Conspiracy theories for me are something that I am not of the like, oh my God, you're a conspiracy theorist at all. We're both not that person.
But I do love it.
There is definitely an obvious, like, there are some absolute cuckoo stuff out there. And then there are reasons there are conspiracy theories because so many of them have come out to be true as well. So that's where I sit in the balance of those kinds of things. I'm definitely an open person, and I don't ever sort of pretend to dare that I know better because I've read an article or for or against. But for you particularly, I mean, you've gone down so many rabbit holes in your time.
So many rabbit holes.
Yeah, there's the lizard one, the aliens.
So this
obviously.
is the thing, is that so I've gone.
What do you think it is for you? What do you think it is, apart from like the truth seeking?
It's understanding again. It's it's trying to intellectualize why the world is the way it is.
Yeah.
It's to find reason for good and evil, for dark and light, whatever you want to call it. Look, I mean, I've gone deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've gone deep, and what I've realized is it's a warning sign now for me. It's not that the theory isn't correct. Like, I believe in a lot of the things that I've read over many different ways of researching many data points, but it's something that's so outside of my body. So when I'm struggling, talk about addiction again, it's another addiction in a way, because it's an external issue that I can put my energy onto rather than what's happening inside. So, and I have in some way through my rabbit holes landed with this kind of philosophy, I guess, is that we have the answers ourselves. We actually know ourselves. But we're so disconnected from ourselves that we're looking for other people to tell us what's happening. So, let's talk about what's just happened recently with Trump. Because we actually, like, all I want to say very quickly is because we actually filmed our first episode on the election day. Whenever we actually release it, we'll be much further on from there. Like, there was a lot of stress and turmoil leading up to that day, because it was flooding news feeds, it was flooding algorithms. It was a way for me to escape. In all honesty, I didn't care who won. Didn't care, because it wasn't about that for me. But now that it's happened and we have the outcome that we have, now it's like I need the next thing. So that's a sign that it's just literally like a dopamine fix and an external release.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying there is that signal that I'm looking to hyper focus on something else, so I'm not looking at what's going on inside for myself.
Definitely.
And I definitely see that for a lot of people as well.
And the deeper I go, the more I pull away from myself as well. So I would say there's truth to all conspiracy theories, but it doesn't, like, it's entertainment. It's like going and watching a reality television show and binge watching that.
There's truth to it, but it's just fantasized and it takes you away from it.
And there is a truth to it, but it's highly produced. And you might want to, like, I remember when you were pregnant and all you could watch was The Bachelor at the time.
Because
it was
a hard pregnancy.
Whereas what I would go do is I would go find out which realm we're in. Are we in the 9th realm? And I just go in a different way, but it's still the same escapism, because I'm not connecting it into myself at all.
Okay, so I wanted to finish with the two things that I want to kind of have as a reoccurring question that we ask to guests and things. And those two things are, first of all, what have you learned? What do you know? And what are you still learning?
What I have learned is material success is an illusion. And where I thought I was going, or where I thought I should have been, was only pulling me further away from myself. And what I know for sure is that there's no clock and we're not on a race anywhere. And it's about the journey, not about the destination.
As Miley Cyrus once said.
But, I've gotten to many destinations and missed some of the journey along the way. And so now I'm trying to focus on the journey and slow it down a little bit.
Okay. Is that what you're also still learning? How to slow down?
Yes, definitely. How to be mindful. So I get these like repeat words that come from everyone else, and I always say mindful, slow down. But it could be like in an exercise.
Voices?
No, the voices are of people I see. So it could be like in an exercise class, where the person turns to me and goes, "Slow down, Laura," or "Be more mindful." Or I could be waiting for a friend, like to pick Jonas up from school, and someone says mindful, and I just hear these repeat words coming at me. Slow down, mindful, slow down, mindful, slow down. So I would say that's what I'm learning. I'm still learning many things, but that's what I'm learning at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that has been beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing about you,
That was
Laura.
amazing. Thank you.
It's been good to actually, I mean, we've known each other, as I said, 20 plus years, and I know so much about you, but I'm still discovering with you, and it's a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well,
Love you.
we'll speak to you next week, and I love you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.